Hello there, this is Dimitris Christou and I'm back with another Blender video tutorial. And this time around we'll be building a nice Call of Duty intro style clip. I've been asked by a friend's friend to build a clip using this style for his logo. And my initial thought was to use Cinema 4D thinking particle, MoGraph and stuff like that. But then again I said, why not try and use Blender? So what I'm trying to do now is hit two birds with one stone. I'll be building the clip for the friend's friend and also setting up a video tutorial for you guys. So let's begin. We have the default cube here selected. I'll hit the X key and select delete to delete it. And I'll hit Shift A and add mesh cylinder. I'll move down here at the bottom left corner for the cylinder options. I'll change the vertices amount from 32 to 12. For my cylinder. I also do not want to have caps for my cylinder, so I'm changing the n-gon, click here, to nothing. I'll increase the depth, set it from 2 up to 10. And what I'll also do is change the radius here from 1, click it, and I'll set it down to 0.03. Let's take a good look. I'm also having issues. I have my mouse's middle button dead for a couple of days now, so I'm emulating the 3-button mouse, but I'm still not used to it, so okay. Our cylinder here looks good. I'll also click smooth under the shading, and then I'll hit the tab key to switch from object to edit mode, and hit R, Y and 90 to rotate my cylinder for 90 degrees on the Y axis. I'm rotating the vertices in edit mode and then therefore rotating the entire cylinder. Okay, I'm hitting Enter to confirm the rotation. Now I'll zoom in closer and I'll hit Ctrl R for a loop cut, and you can see the loop cut here at the middle of the cylinder. But what I'll do now is scroll my mouse wheel up lots of times. We want lots of loop cuts. You can see at the bottom left corner the amount of cuts. I'll set it up, let's say to 120, okay. And then click the left mouse button to confirm and the right mouse button to cancel any movement for the created loop cuts. Alright. I think we're good. One thing I'll do now is scale it down on the Y and Z axis, so I'm going to hit S on my keyboard and Shift X to scale my cylinder only on the Y and Z axis. Let's scale it down a bit. I want my cylinder here to be thin, okay, and I think we're good at about there. Alright, hitting the tab key again, and I'll hit 1 on my numeric keypad and 5 for the front ortho view. I'll hit the del key, the comma key on my numeric keypad again to frame the cylinder, and I'll hit Ctrl Alt and 0 to roughly position my camera where I was looking before. I can right mouse button click the cylinder frame to select the camera, and I'll move over to the object data to the transform for the camera, and I'll change the Y value here to -10. Alright. So I'm going to select my cylinder here again, and what I'll do for my cylinder is move over to the modifiers panel and click add modifier, and I'll add a wave modifier. Alright, let's hit play to see how the wave modifier works on our cylinder, on our object. And as you can see, we have the wave starting from the center of the cylinder, and I really don't like that. I don't like how it starts from here. It looks too symmetrical. So let's pause. First thing I'll do is change the position here, the X. We have the cylinder here is 10 units long, so I'm going to set it to 5 to switch the center of the wave to the side. And let's see again. Okay. Looking better now. I'll bring the speed down a bit. Let's set it to 0.2. And what I'll also do is bring the height down. Let's set it to 0.2 as well. Okay, at about there. What I'll also do for my cylinder here, for my wave, is add a material to it. click this little orange sphere here for the material panel and click new for a new material. I'm going to change this one into line_1. I'll bring the specular intensity down to 0 and change the diffuse color. We want a nice bright green color for the line here. And what I'll also do is add some emit under the shading tab. Let's set it to 0.3. Okay. So we're having the material for our line here for our cylinder. And I'm hitting 7 on my memory keypad for the top ortho view. I'm zooming in a bit. And I want to create a duplicate, so I'm going to hit Shift D for a duplicate. And Y to move the duplicate on the Y axis. And let's move it away at about here. And what I'll do for this new cylinder here, for this new object, is change the wave modifier a bit. And I'll bring the height to -0.2. Okay. And for a slight variation, I'll change the speed from 0.2 to 0.21. Okay. Hitting 0 on my memory keypad to switch to camera perspective view. Hit play to see how it looks. Okay, and you can see that in time we're having the waves behaving differently. Let's change the speed to 0.205. Okay. Let's take a look. Alright. So, hitting 7 on my memory keypad. Let's create another duplicate for the cylinder, Shift D, and Y to move the duplicate on the Y axis. Okay. And for this one, we will increase the height. Let's set it to 0.3. And change the speed to 0.15. And let's create another duplicate, Shift D on the Y axis. Move it at about here. And this time around, we'll set it to -0.3. And I'll change the width for this one slightly. Let's set it to 1.55. Okay. Let's see them. We now have 4 cylinders. And we have this little animation here. Okay. Now for our next one, I'll hit 7 again on my memory keypad. And Shift D to create another duplicate and Y to move it on Y axis. Let's move it away. Now for this one, what I'll do is add a texture to affect the cylinder, to affect the wave modifier, and click new. And as you can see, we're now having a texture affecting the cylinder and the wave modifier, and now it looks pretty interesting too. I'll set this one to 1. And in order to smoothen my cylinder here, what I'll do is click Add Modifier, and I'll add the Subdivision Surface modifier. I'll set the View and Render to 1. Okay. Now let's see how this one looks. And of course we have to change the wave modifier a bit. Let's bring the speed down to 0.12. Okay. Let's see. Okay, and I'll increase the height a bit. Let's set it to 1.2. Alright. Now for this wave here, for this cylinder here, I'll also add a particle system. But I'll first create a particle. I'll hit Shift A and add Mesh and Ecosphere. I'll bring the subdivisions for the ecosphere from 2 down to 1. And I'll also add material to my ecosphere here. Move over to Material panel and click New. I'll bring the specular intensity down to 0, change the diffuse color to a nice bright green one. Okay. And I'll increase the emit value under the shading tab from 0 to 1. Okay. Our particle here is ready. I'll hit the M key and move the particle to the second layer. Okay. Now I'm selecting the cylinder, the object I want to apply the particle system. Move over to the particle system panel and click the plus icon for a new particle system. I'll bring the number for the particles from 1000 up to 10,000. Okay. I'll bring the start, let's set it to 90 I want my particle system to begin generating particles at frame 90. And let's make it stop at frame, let's say, 300. I want to set the lifetime for my particles from 50 to 45. And I'm operating at 30 frames per second for this clip, excuse me. You can see it here. And what I also want is to emit the particles from the volume, so I'm clicking volume. I want a random distribution for my particles, okay. I'll change the cache step from 10 down to 1, okay. And what I'll also do is use an object. I want the render for the particles to use an object, so I'm clicking object. And let's select our duplicate object, and it'll be the ecosphere, okay. And next thing I want to do is move down to the field weights and change the gravity from 1 down to 0. Okay, we don't want any gravity applied to our particles. What I'll also do, and you can see my particles here, is change the size. Let's set it from 0.05, which is the default, down to 0.01. And what I'll also do is add a bit of randomness for the size. Let's set it to 0.3. Okay. And let's move back to frame 1 and hit play. And we have to wait a bit for the particles to appear. They will appear at frame 90. And as you can see, it looks pretty nice, but we have the particles flying all over the place. And we don't want that. So I'm going to change for the velocity here, the normal, from 1 down to 0. I don't want to have any speed added to the particles by the object. And let's see how it looks now. Okay, we have the particle generated, they stay in place. It looks odd now, but we'll fix it. So hitting pause and going back to frame 1. And in order to make my particles move here, I'll add force fields. So I'm hitting Shift A and add force field, and I'll add wind. I'm hitting 1 on my numeric keypad for the front ortho view, and we have the force field here selected. I'll hit the G key to grab it, let's move it to the side, and I'll hit the R key to rotate it, let's rotate it. And about here, you can see at the bottom of left corner, I'm rotating my force field here for minus 75 degrees. And I'll also hit 7 on my numeric keypad for the top ortho view. And I want a slight rotation for the force field here, so I'm going to set the X. Let's set it down to minus 5, or perhaps minus 10. And you can see that I want the particles here, the wind, to affect the particles and blow them this way. Okay. So moving over to the options for the force field, for the physics. I'll set the strength up to, let's set it 1.5. And I think we're good at about there. And what I'll also do is hit Shift A and add force field. Let's add a turbulence force field. And for the turbulence here, and I wanted to add another sort of variation for my scene, for my particles. So I'll increase the strength from 1 up to 2 and change the flow from 0 to 1. Okay. Now hitting 0 on my numeric keypad to switch to camera perspective view, and let's take a look. Let's wait to frame 90. Okay. And now you can see that the particles are being generated and flying nicely. Okay, looking good. So I'm selecting the cylinder, the one that carries the particle system, and hitting 1 or perhaps 7 on my numeric keypad to switch to top ortho view. And I'll hit Shift D for a duplicate, and Y to move the duplicate on the Y axis. Let's take a closer look. Z and Y. Okay. And for this one, what I want to do is change the wave modifier options. Let's set the height to minus 1.3. Okay. And let's change the width to 1.6 or something. Okay, let's set it to 1.56. we want it to be slightly different than the one above. Let's take a look. So we're now having both the cylinders here adding particles and being affected by the force fields, by the wind and the turbulence. Okay. Looking good so far. I think it looks nice. And I'm hitting, let's change the width a bit more, okay, 1.57. Alright. So I'm hitting 7 on my make keypad for the top ortho view. And I'm going to select this cylinder here and hit Shift D for a duplicate and Y to move the duplicate on the Y axis. Let's take a closer look, Z and Y, let's move it at about here. Okay. And 0 for the camera perspective view, and this cylinder here will use a bigger height. Let's set it to 2 is too much. Let's set it to 1.5. Okay. And let's create another one. Shift D and Y, move it on the Y axis. Okay. And 0 for the camera perspective view, and let's set this one to -1.4. And I want to change the speed for both of them. Let's change it to 0.1 for this one and 0.12 for this one. Alright. Now let's take a look. Alright. And this is actually the idea. We're adding cylinders here, we're adding the particle system, we're trying to create an interesting look for our clip. I think it looks nice so far. And I will move over to the world options, click this little blue sphere for the world options, change the horizon color. Let's set it to black. And let's render an image. Okay. And what I should also do is select the particle emitting cylinders here, the waves, and let's add a different particle for those. I'm selecting the material and clicking this little 8 icon here to create a unique material for this object, for the cylinder. I'll change the name to line_2 and I'll change the diffuse color a bit. Let's make it slightly darker for this one. Okay. And let's bring the mid down to 0.25 and select this one, and this will use the line 2 material. Okay, let's render again. Alright, and I'm going to create yet another material. I'm selecting the front, I'll select the front 4 cylinders here and create a unique material for those as well. I'm clicking on this little 6 icon here. And let's set this one to be 3. And let's change the diffuse color. Let's bring it closer to white. Okay, at about here. And let's select this one as well. This one will use the line 3. And this one will use the line 3. And I'm guessing that this one should also use line 3. Alright. Let's render again. Okay, looking good. Now I'm hitting the escape key, and while this looks pretty interesting, let's add some compositing to make it look even better. I'm moving at the upper right corner of my 3D view, click and drag, and what I want here is to have a node editor. I'll click use nodes and backdrop. Let's zoom in a bit, and I'll hit the N key to make this panel here go away. Okay. Click the render layers, hit the G key to move it to the left side, and click on the composite and hit the G key to grab and move it to the right side. And about here. And first thing I'll do is hit Shift A and add output viewer. Let's move it to the right side. Now I'll hit Shift A to add color. Let's add a blur. Move over to filter and select blur. And by default it is set to Gaussian. I will change it to fast Gaussian. I'll set the X for the fast Gaussian here from 0 to 5, and let's set the Y from 0 to, let's say, 35. And let's take the output from the blur node and put it on the viewer so we can see what we're doing here. And let's set the Y to 40. Okay. And what I want to do is I'll hit Shift A, and let's add color and mix node. And what we want to do is to mix the blurred output and the actual render layer. And I'll set the mix to add, and I think we're good at about there. Okay. Now you can see we're having the interesting effect here. I'll hit Shift A, and I'll also add filter a glare node. Okay, and moving the glare node between the viewer and the add node, and you can see the line here turning orange, which means that if I click here, it will automatically connect the node, hitting the G key to grab it, and it is set to streaks by default, and we will use streaks. All I'll do is move the threshold down. Let's set it down so we can see the effect kicking in. Alright, and I think we're good at about there. Okay. Now this effect uses 4 streaks. I'm going to change them from 4 to 2. And now they're applied horizontally. You can see the streaks here and here at places. So I'm going to change the angle offset. Let's set it to 90 for a vertical streak effect. Okay. And what I'll do now is I'll hit Shift A and add the stored lens distortion node. Let's connect this one as well. I'll click projector and increase the dispersion here from 0 to 0.3. I think we're good at about there. And let's move our nodes here a bit. Okay. I want another lens distortion node here. I'll hit Shift D to duplicate the existing one and connect it. And uncheck projector and set the dispersion down to 0.1. Okay. And in order for everything to appear in our render, all we have to do is take the output of the final node, and this is the lens distortion node, and make it an input for the composite node. Alright. Now let's add some sort of text for our scene here. I'll hit Shift A and add text. I'll hit RX and 90 to rotate the text for 90 degrees on the x-axis, so I'm having it facing the camera, and hit enter. I'll hit the tab key to switch to edit mode for the text, and when switching to edit mode for the text you can alter the input text. And I'm going to write down here call of Blender, hitting the tab key again to switch to object mode, and clicking this little F icon to move over to the text options. First thing I'll do is center my text, and let's also change the font. I'm clicking this little icon here to change the regular font, and let's find a font, the Impact, which is pretty close to the Call of Duty font, and I'm pretty sure that everybody will be having Impact on his computer. And I'll also hit the tab key. I think I've left the space here between the call and the off. Okay, tab again. And for this one here, I'll increase the size. Let's set it up to 1.5 for the text. And I think this looks pretty nice. I'm hitting 1 on my numeric keypad for the front author view. I hit Z and Y to Z to move my text and place it at the center of the scene at about here. And let's take a look. I'll hit 7 again on my numeric keypad to switch to top author view. I'll hit Z and Y to move it right front of the cylinders of the waves here. And let's take another look. Okay, looking good. Now for my text, I'll add some offset, a positive offset value, and this makes my text here thicker. Let's set it to 0.010, okay. And let's add the material to this text. I'm moving over to the material panel, and just to make things short, I'll add the material the particle uses. Let's change the name to particle. Okay, and I'm hitting 7 for the top author view. I'll hit Shift D and Y to create a duplicate of the text. Okay, and for this one, for the text that we've put in front of the other text, I will use a black material. Click this little tree icon for a unique material and change the name of this one to black. Let's set it to black. Okay, and for this text, I'll move over to the text options and bring the offset down, so I'm having a thinner type of text. Let's set it down to 0.010. Okay, now I'm hitting 0, or perhaps before doing that, I'm going to select the text that uses the green material, and then hold down the Shift key and right click to select the text that uses the black material, and hit Ctrl P and set parent to object, so the black text is the parent of the green text. Let's add some animation here. I'm hitting 0 on my animate keypad for the camera perspective view, and I'll hit G and Z to grab and move on the Z axis. Let's move our text away. Okay, and let's move over to frame, let's say 120 perhaps. Okay, I'll hit the I key to insert the keyframe for the text, and click location. I want to insert the keyframe for frame 108 and 20 for the text, for the location. And let's move over to frame 150 and hit Z and Z and move it on the Z axis. Move it to the center and then hit the I key to insert another location keyframe. Okay, let's take a look. Hitting play. Looking good. We have the particles appearing at frame 90. Okay, you can see them. And we have the text here appearing at frame 150. Okay, there's another thing I want to do. I'll select this wave here, this cylinder here, and move over to the modifiers. I want to alter the wave modifier a bit. And what I actually want is to start with some of the waves and then have those appearing. And this is a pretty simple thing to do. Let's move to frame, let's say frame 90, where we'll be having our particles here appearing. And this one is selected. I'll hit the I key while my cursor is over the height, and I want to insert the keyframe for frame 90 for the height to be 1.2. So I'm hitting I, and you can see it turns yellow. And let's bring this one down to 75. And then bring the height down to 0. And then hit the I key to insert another keyframe. So our wave begins with a height of 0. It is a flat line. And from frame 75 to frame 90, it begins forming up and then adding the particles to the scene. Let's do the same with the bottom wave that adds particles. Move to frame 90. Okay. And we have the height to minus 1.3. I'll hit the I key to insert a keyframe for this one. And then move down to frame 75. And then set the height to 0. And then hit the I key to insert a keyframe for the height for frame 75. I'll do the same thing for the big waves here. Let's move them at about here at 120. Hit the I key to insert the keyframe for the height at 1.5 for frame 120. And this one as well, hit the I key. And then move down to frame, let's say, 100. And set this one to 0. Hit the I key to insert, select this one, set it to 0 as well, and then hit the I key to insert another keyframe for the height. And as you can imagine, you can add all sorts of keyframes for your waves. You can having the speed changing in the course of the animation. You can have the width, changing in the course of the animation, and you can create all sorts of cool effects. So let's take a look, moving back to frame 1, hitting play to see. And as you can see, we have these waves here appearing at first and moving, and we'll soon have those waves that also add particles to our scene, and then the big waves, and then we have the Call of Blender text appearing. Okay, let's pause here and let's render an image to see how it looks. And I think it looks pretty nice. Okay, so this is it. This is the foundation. Of course, you can always add more waves, add more particles, add different particle systems. Use your imagination, use Blender. You're having some great tools here, some great stuff here in Blender to create your clips. And I'd love to see your creations using Blender. As you can see, it's pretty easy. We've only used one modifier and one particle system. I'll be rendering some clips for you guys to see. So this is it. This is Dimitris, Christou, and thanks for watching.